Zytra stood in the middle of her laboratory, her long fingers moving across the glowing control panel. The air smelled sterile, filled with the quiet hum of advanced machines. She had spent over 2 centuries working in genetic science, designing new life forms for the Accelerate Empire. Her people believed in perfection, stronger bodies, faster minds, flawless evolution. And yet today, she had been assigned a task that felt beneath her expertise. Humans, Zytra muttered, her eyes narrowing as she read the research order from the Accelerate High Council. Why would they waste my time on such primitive creatures? The Accelerate had observed Earth from a distance for centuries. The humans were unpredictable, emotional, and biologically weak compared to most advanced species. They lacked natural armor, their muscles were inefficient, and their lifespans were short. In Zytra's mind, they were nothing more than an unfinished experiment of the universe. But the council had spoken. She sighed and tapped on the holographic interface, pulling up a list of available human subjects. Many had already been captured and placed in suspended animation for research purposes. Zytra's job was simple: analyze their genetic structure and prove once and for all that humans were inferior. She scanned the list, her sharp eyes moving quickly. Some were soldiers, some scientists, others ordinary workers. Their genetic codes looked the same to her: basic, unremarkable, and full of flaws. But then, one profile caught her attention. Name: Ben Carter. Age: 29. Occupation: engineer. Psychological profile: unpredictable, resilient, high problem-solving ability. Zytra hesitated for a moment. The word resilient was rare in human reports. Most of them broke down easily in extreme situations. Curiosity flickered in her mind, though she quickly pushed it aside. It didn't matter. No human could impress her. With a wave of her hand, she activated the chamber containing Ben. A bright blue light pulsed as the stasis field deactivated, and the glass tube slowly opened. The human fell forward, coughing and gasping for air. His dark hair was messy, and his clothes were wrinkled from months in suspension. But his eyes, Zytra noticed, held no fear. Instead, they darted around, scanning his surroundings, assessing the situation. Interesting. Ben groaned, rubbing his temples. Okay, where am I? And who's the tall, blue-skinned scientist looking at me like I'm a bug? Zytra's expression remained calm, though she felt an unexpected sense of amusement. Most humans panicked when they woke up in an alien laboratory. This one, however, was making jokes. You are on a Accelerate research station, Zytra replied. Her voice was smooth but cold, her tone purely professional. You have been selected for a series of genetic evaluations. Answer my questions, and the process will be easier for you. Ben rolled his shoulders and looked around at the glowing machines. Right, so basically, I got abducted by aliens. He let out a slow breath and muttered, Great. And here I was hoping to get a weekend off. Zytra ignored his sarcasm. Your cooperation will determine your comfort level during this study. Resistance is unnecessary. Ben tilted his head. Study, huh? And what exactly are you trying to find? Zytra tapped a few buttons on her control panel, bringing up a holographic display of his DNA sequence. Your genetic code is being analyzed for anomalies. Our research aims to determine if your species holds any value beyond its current classification. Ben frowned. And what classification is that? Zytra's yellow eyes met his. Biologically inefficient, evolutionary dead end. Ben let out a sharp laugh. Wow. Thanks for the confidence boost. You guys always this polite to your test subjects. Zytra ignored the question and began the first test. A robotic arm extended toward Ben, scanning him with a beam of golden light. Data flooded the screen: muscle density, neural activity, stress response. Zytra expected the usual human weaknesses. But something was different. His stress levels should have been high, but they were balanced. His brain activity was unusually fast, adapting to the situation in real time. His muscle fibers, though smaller than Escalated, showed a unique flexibility, as if his body was constantly adjusting itself. Zytra frowned. This was unexpected. Ben noticed her expression. Something wrong, Doc. Zytra didn't answer immediately. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Maybe this research wasn't as pointless as she had thought. Maybe humans were not as weak as they seemed. Ben sat on the cold metal floor of the research station, rubbing his wrists. The auxiliary scientists had removed his restraints, but he still felt like a prisoner. Bright white lights shone from the ceiling, making the room feel even more unnatural. Zytra stood in front of him, her arms crossed. Her yellow eyes studied him carefully, as if he were an unsolved puzzle. "You are handling this situation differently than expected," she said. Ben raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? And how did you expect me to act?" Zytra turned toward a floating holographic screen, scrolling through data. Most humans panic, beg for release, or attempt to escape. You, however, remain calm. "This is unusual." Ben shrugged. "Look, I woke up in an alien lab, and I can't do much about it right now. Screaming won't help, so I might as well go along with the show." Zytra tilted her head slightly. Logical thinking. But logic is not considered a strong human trait. Ben let out a short laugh. "You guys really don't think highly of us, huh?" Zytra ignored his comment and tapped a control panel. A robotic drone floated into the room, carrying a small metallic sphere. The ball hovered in the air for a moment before splitting apart, revealing the glowing core. "This is a cognitive test," Zytra said. "It will present a series of problems. You must solve them within a time limit." Ben leaned back against the wall. "A test. What happens if I fail?" "Failure is expected," Zytra said simply. "It will confirm our hypothesis that humans lack high-level problem-solving abilities." Ben smirked. "And what if I win?" Zytra hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "That would be surprising." Ben cracked his knuckles. "All right, let's see what you got." The sphere flashed, and a complex 3D puzzle appeared in the air. It was a shifting structure of glowing pieces, rotating in multiple directions. Strange symbols covered its surface, changing constantly. A robotic voice spoke. "Solve the sequence. Time remaining 2 minutes." Ben frowned, focusing on the symbols. At first, they seemed random, but then he noticed a pattern. Each rotation followed a mathematical rule. His fingers moved quickly, adjusting the pieces, testing combinations. Zytra watched in silence. Her calculations said that humans should struggle with this level of complexity. But Ben was adapting. His hands worked with a mix of logic and instinct, trying solutions, discarding failures, learning with each mistake. 30 seconds remaining. Ben felt sweat forming on his brow. Come on, come on." The final piece clicked into place. The sphere pulsed with a bright blue light. Solution complete. Zytra's eyes widened slightly. Ben grinned and leaned back. "That was fun. Got anything harder?" Zytra remained quiet for a moment, then tapped the panel again. Next test. A different puzzle appeared, this one changing shape every few seconds. Zytra was certain this would be too much for a human mind to process. Ben stared at it, muttering to himself as he worked through the problem. Zytra noticed something strange. Unlike Auxiliary, who would rely on strict logic, Ben used trial and error, adjusting his strategy on the spot. He made mistakes but learned from them instantly. Minutes later, the puzzle was solved. Zytra felt an unfamiliar sensation, doubt. "You were not supposed to succeed," she said. Ben smirked. "Well, sorry to ruin your expectations." Zytra stepped back, staring at the data. Humans were supposed to be biologically inefficient. Their brains were supposed to be less advanced. And yet, this human had just outperformed what should have been impossible for his species. She exhaled slowly, collecting herself. "This test does not change our research. One success does not prove superiority." Ben stretched his arms. All right then, what's next? Zytra's expression hardened. A physical challenge. Ben stood up, rolling his shoulders. Now we're talking. Ben stood in the center of a massive training room, stretching his arms as he prepared for whatever alien challenge Zytra had planned next. The walls were smooth, dark metal, and glowing blue lines ran across the floor, forming strange patterns. The air smelled clean but artificial, like a place designed for efficiency, not comfort. Zytra stood on a raised platform, observing him with her usual cold expression. Beside her, several auxiliary researchers tapped on holographic panels, adjusting the settings for the next test. This is a combat simulation, Zytra announced. You will be tested against an auxiliary training unit. Your goal is simple: survive for 3 minutes. Ben raised an eyebrow. Survive, not win. Zytra's voice remained neutral. Winning is not possible. Ben smirked. We'll see about that. With a wave of Zytra's hand, the floor shifted, and a tall humanoid figure emerged. The training unit was twice Ben's size, its metallic body covered in armor-like plating. Its glowing red eyes locked onto him, scanning him as if calculating the best way to take him down. Ben let out a slow breath. All right, big guy. Let's dance. The moment the countdown began, the training unit charged. Ben barely dodged in time as the creature's massive fist slammed into the ground, cracking the surface. He rolled to the side, jumping to his feet just as the machine lunged again. Fast, Ben muttered, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't overpower this thing, but maybe he didn't have to. He moved, staying just ahead of each strike. The machine fought with perfect precision, its attacks calculated for maximum efficiency. But that was also its weakness. It was too predictable. Ben feinted to the left, then suddenly reversed, causing the machine to miss by inches. Zytra's eyes narrowed as she watched. Most species relied on raw strength to fight, but Ben was using strategy, forcing the machine to adjust. The researchers around her whispered among themselves. He should be down by now, one said. Why is he still moving? Another added. Ben ducked as the machine swung again, barely missing his head. He noticed something, a slight delay between its attacks, just a fraction of a second. That was his opening. He needed to tire it out. For the next minute, he focused on dodging rather than attacking. The machine tried to predict his movements, but Ben kept changing his rhythm, confusing its programming. Zytra leaned forward slightly. This was unusual. Most warriors reacted with instinct or brute force, but this human was analyzing the fight, adapting to his opponent in real time. Ben grinned as he saw the machine hesitate for a brief moment. Gotcha. He suddenly lunged forward, sliding under the machine's arm and delivering a powerful kick to the back of its knee joint. It wasn't enough to break it, but it made the machine stumble. Zytra's eyes widened. Humans were weaker, yes. Slower, yes. But their unpredictability, that was something else. The machine corrected its stance and attacked again, but the 3-minute timer beeped. Test complete. The machine stopped, returning to its neutral stance. Ben stood there, breathing hard, but still on his feet. Zytra stared at him in silence. Not bad, Ben said, wiping sweat from his forehead. So, do I get a prize? Zytra ignored his joke. You should not have lasted that long. Ben shrugged. Yeah, well, humans don't always follow the rules. Zytra turned to the researchers. Increase the difficulty level. Ben's smirk faded. Wait, what? Before he could react, 2 training units emerged. Zytra's voice was calm. Let's see how far your resilience truly goes. Ben sighed. I really need to stop impressing you. Ben took a deep breath, his muscles aching as he stared at the 2 towering training units before him. The first fight had already drained his energy, and now Zytra had doubled the challenge. Okay, he muttered to himself. This is getting unfair. Zytra remained on the raised platform, her golden eyes locked onto him. Begin. The two machines rushed forward at the same time. Ben barely dodged the first strike, rolling to the side just as the second unit's fist came crashing down. The floor shook from the impact. No way could he fight both directly. His mind worked fast. Think, think, think. The machines were faster, stronger, and had no sense of exhaustion. But they had one flaw. They were programmed, not alive. That meant they could be tricked. Ben dashed toward the wall, forcing the machines to chase him. He waited until the last second, and then jumped, grabbing onto a metal bar above. One machine slammed into the wall, sparks flying from its arm. Ben smirked. One down. The second unit adapted quickly and leaped after him. Ben's eyes widened. Okay, that's new. The machine grabbed his ankle, yanking him down. He landed hard on the ground, pain shooting through his shoulder. The machine raised its fist for a final strike. Ben rolled away just in time. The punch missed and smashed into the floor, leaving a deep dent. Zytra observed, feeling something unusual, curiosity. Ben was injured, exhausted, and outmatched. Any normal species would surrender. But he didn't stop moving. Even when cornered, even when the odds were against him, he kept fighting. Why? Ben forced himself up. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes still burned with determination. All right, round 2. Zytra spoke into the communicator, paused the simulation. The training units froze instantly. Ben blinked. Wait, that's it. Zytra stepped down from the platform and walked toward him. Your survival is unexpected. Ben groaned, stretching his sore arms. You keep saying that. Starting to think you don't know humans very well. Zytra studied him. Your body is weaker than Xilari. Your speed is lower. Your strength is average, yet you display persistence beyond logical reasoning. Ben smirked. Yeah, that's kinda our thing. Zytra's mind was conflicted. The data was clear. Humans shouldn't be impressive. Yet this one kept proving her calculations wrong. She turned to the researchers. Prepare the next test. Ben groaned. Oh, come on. Give me 5 minutes. Zytra looked at him. Do you surrender? Ben straightened up, despite the pain in his body. Not a chance. Zytra's eyes flickered with something close to respect. Then we continue. Ben stood in the center of the training room, his body aching from the last challenge. His arms felt heavy, his legs stiff, but he refused to show weakness. He could feel Zytra's sharp gaze on him, analyzing his every move. Next test, Zytra said, signaling to the researchers. A deep mechanical hum filled the room as the walls shifted, revealing a new challenge. Ben's tired eyes widened as he saw it, a gauntlet of moving platforms, rotating blades, and high-speed laser traps. Ben let out a slow whistle. You guys really don't believe in brakes. This test measures endurance, reflexes, and adaptability. Zytra said. Xilari soldiers take an average of 30 minutes to complete it. Ben stretched his arms. And how long do I have? 15 minutes. Ben blinked, seriously. Zytra nodded. You enjoy impossible odds, do you not? Ben chuckled, shaking his head. Fine. Let's do this. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The floor shifted beneath him, forcing Ben to move quickly. The first obstacle was a series of unstable platforms, rising and falling at random. He leaped onto the first platform, almost slipping, but caught himself just in time. The second platform dropped suddenly, forcing him to jump midair to the third. Zytra watched with intense focus. Humans were not built for this level of agility. Yet Ben was adapting faster than expected. The next obstacle was a spinning blade corridor. Sharp metallic arms swung across his path, moving unpredictably. Ben took a deep breath. Timing was everything. He dodged left, then right. He ducked under one blade, narrowly avoiding a second that whooshed past his head. One wrong move, and he'd be sliced. Zitra's researchers whispered among themselves. He should have been hit by now. Zitra remained silent. Ben reached the next section, a high-speed laser grid. Thin red beams crisscrossed the air, forcing him to twist, jump, and slide like an acrobat. His muscles burned, his lungs ached, but he kept moving. He wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the fastest, but he refused to stop. Zitra's fingers twitched as she observed. Humans should have limits. Their biology was inferior compared to the Xilari. So why was this human still going? Ben leaped across the final gap, landing hard on the platform. The moment his feet touched the ground, the timer stopped. Zitra's voice was calm, but her expression betrayed her surprise. 14 minutes. You succeeded. Ben sat on the floor, panting. Well, that sucked. Zitra stepped closer, staring at him. You were not supposed to pass this test. Ben wiped sweat from his forehead. Yeah, you keep saying that. Zitra hesitated. For the first time, she questioned the research. She had believed humans were biologically weak, yet this one kept defying expectations. Her golden eyes narrowed. Was science wrong about humanity? Ben noticed her expression and smirked. What's wrong? Starting to believe in me. Zitra exhaled slowly. We will see. Ben sat on the cold metal floor of the training room, his chest rising and falling as he struggled to catch his breath. His entire body ached from the brutal gauntlet he had just completed. His muscles screamed for rest, but he ignored the pain. He had won, and that was what mattered. Zitra stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching him with her usual unreadable expression. But there was something different in her eyes now. Curiosity, doubt, something she had never felt about a human before. You should not have finished the test, she said. Ben smirked weakly. Yeah, you said that last time too. Zitra's gaze remained fixed on him. Your body is weaker than Xilari's. Your reaction time is slower. Your endurance should be inferior. And yet, she paused, as if struggling to find the right words. You persist. Ben leaned back on his hands, looking up at the ceiling. That's the thing about humans. We don't quit just because something's hard. Zitra studied him in silence for a moment before turning to the researchers. Run a physiological scan on him. A hovering drone descended from the ceiling, scanning Ben's body with a soft blue light. Zitra's eyes flickered over the holographic display that appeared before her. The data made no sense. His muscle fibers were torn, yet he kept moving. His oxygen levels were dangerously low, yet he kept breathing. His pain tolerance had increased over time, instead of decreasing. Ben saw her frown. Something wrong. Zitra hesitated. Your body should be failing. Ben chuckled. Well, it's not. So what's next? Another fight. A harder test. He grinned. Bring it on. Zitra stared at him. Most species she studied followed predictable patterns. Their limits were clear. Their breaking points were inevitable. But this human, he was different. She turned to the researchers. No more physical tests. Ben raised an eyebrow. Oh, giving up on me already. Zitra ignored his joke. I need to understand something else. Not just your strength, but... She hesitated, as if the words were difficult to say. Your mind. Ben sat up straighter. Mind, huh? You want to see how smart I am? Zitra shook her head. Not intelligence. Something else. Something that defies logic. Ben's smile faded slightly. And what's that? Zitra looked him in the eyes. Your willpower. Ben blinked. Willpower. Yes, Zitra said. Your ability to push forward despite pain, despite exhaustion, despite the certainty of failure. That is what I do not understand. Ben stretched his arms. Well, I'm happy to help with that mystery. What's the test? Zitra didn't answer right away. Instead, she tapped on her wrist device, and the room changed. The floor beneath them melted away, revealing a vast, endless void. The walls faded into darkness. It was as if they were floating in space, alone in the universe. Then, voices began to whisper, soft at first, then louder. Dozens of them, hundreds, a mix of fear, sadness, and despair. Ben frowned. What is this? Zytra's voice was calm. A mental endurance test, a simulation designed to break the mind by overwhelming it with doubt, pain, and fear. The whispers grew sharper, forming words. You are weak. You will fail. You are alone. You should give up. The darkness pressed in from all sides, suffocating, endless. The air felt heavy, cold. Ben clenched his fists. Neat trick. Zytra watched closely. Most test subjects collapsed within minutes, unable to endure the crushing weight of the simulation. Even Siluri warriors, trained in mental resilience, struggled to last more than an hour. But Ben, he smiled. The voices kept whispering. The darkness tightened its grip. The emptiness tried to break him. And yet he stood there, completely unshaken. Zytra felt something stir inside her. Confusion, disbelief, and for the first time, admiration. Ben chuckled softly. You really don't get humans, do you? Zytra narrowed her eyes. Explain. Ben looked into the darkness, unafraid. You think you can break me with fear? With doubt? He shook his head. You don't understand what it means to be human. Zytra said nothing, waiting. Ben took a deep breath. We fall. We get hurt. We struggle. And yeah, sometimes we think about giving up. The whispers grew louder, as if trying to drown out his words. Ben gritted his teeth and took a step forward. But we don't quit. We don't stop. No matter how hard it gets, no matter how much it hurts, we keep going. The darkness shuddered. Zytra's eyes widened slightly. Impossible. Ben smiled. You wanted to know what makes us different. He spread his arms. This, right here, we don't break. The whispers faded. The darkness recoiled. The simulation collapsed. And Ben was still standing. Zytra stared at him. For the first time, she felt something she never expected. Respect. Ben stood tall, his breathing steady, as the darkness of the simulation vanished around him. The mental test, designed to break even the strongest warriors, had failed against him. Zytra remained silent, staring at him with an expression Ben had never seen before. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was deep respect, and something more. She finally spoke, her voice softer than usual. You are different. Ben smirked, rubbing his sore shoulders. You keep saying that, starting to sound like a compliment. Zytra ignored his joke. She turned to the researchers who were still staring at their screens in disbelief. How long did he last? One of them hesitated before answering. The simulation was supposed to intensify over time, but he never showed signs of breaking. Zytra's golden eyes flickered with thought. That should be impossible. Ben stretched his arms. Maybe your test isn't as good as you think. She frowned. No, the test is effective. It works on every species we have studied. Ben tilted his head. Then maybe you haven't studied the right species. The room fell silent. Zytra crossed her arms. Your strength is not in your body. It is in your mind, in your willpower. Ben shrugged. Yeah, that's kinda what I've been telling you. She stepped closer, her voice quieter. Why? Why do you fight like this? Why do you refuse to give up, even when it would be logical? Ben's smile faded slightly. He thought for a moment before answering. Because that's what it means to be human. Zytra watched him closely. Ben continued, his voice steady. We don't have the strongest bodies. We don't have the fastest reflexes. We don't have natural weapons or thick armor. But what we do have is the ability to keep pushing forward, no matter what. Zytra remained silent, absorbing his words. Ben sighed, looking up at the ceiling. Back on Earth, people have faced things a lot worse than some test. Wars, disasters, hunger, pain. But we keep going. We survive. And we don't just survive. We grow. We build. We adapt. We never stop trying. Zitra's fingers twitched. No other species thought this way. The Silari were powerful, yes, but they relied on strength, on dominance, on cold logic. They did not push past their limits the way humans did. She finally spoke. That is why you succeeded. It was never about your body. It was about something more. Ben grinned. Now you're getting it. Zitra studied him for a moment before turning back to the researchers. Record today's data as an exception. One of the scientists hesitated, but that would mean rewriting some of our theories. Zitra's voice was firm. Then rewrite them. Ben raised an eyebrow. Wow, you're admitting humans are special. I never thought I'd see the day. Zitra glanced at him. I am admitting that we have misunderstood your kind. Ben put his hands on his hips. I'll take it. She nodded slightly. The tests are over. You have proven enough. Ben exhaled in relief. Finally. Does that mean I get a nap now? Zitra hesitated, then, to his surprise, she said, yes. Ben blinked. Wait, really? Zitra's lips curled ever so slightly. A hint of amusement. Yes, you have earned it. Ben grinned. Now that's what I like to hear. As he walked toward the exit, he glanced back at Zitra. There was something different in her expression now. Something new. Understanding. Respect. And maybe something else. Ben lay on the metallic bench in his assigned quarters, staring at the ceiling. His body ached from the intense tests, but his mind was wide awake. For the first time since arriving in the auxiliary research facility, he wasn't being pushed into another challenge. No surprise tests, no impossible tasks, no lectures about human weakness. Just quiet. It was almost unsettling. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Ben sat up. Zitra stepped inside, her posture as straight and composed as ever. But something was different. Her expression wasn't cold and analytical like before. She looked thoughtful. Ben stretched his arms. Didn't expect to see you here. Miss me already? Zitra ignored his teasing. I have been reviewing the data from your tests. Ben chuckled. Let me guess, you're still confused. Zitra nodded slightly. Yes, but not in the way I expected. Ben patted the bench beside him. Take a seat. Maybe talking it out will help. She hesitated, then, to his surprise, actually sat down. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was different. Zitra finally spoke. I was trained to believe that strength comes from superior biology, intelligence, and control. That evolution determines the fate of a species. The weak fall, the strong rise. Ben tilted his head. Sounds like a simple way of looking at things. She nodded. It is logical. It is how the Xilari have ruled for centuries. We are stronger. We are advanced. That is why we dominate the lesser species. Ben smirked. And yet, here I am. A lesser species that just turned your tests upside down. Zitra's golden eyes met his. Yes, that is why I am struggling to understand. Ben leaned forward. Maybe you're just looking at strength the wrong way. Zitra narrowed her eyes. Explain. Ben tapped his chest. Strength isn't just about muscles or technology. Real strength is about the will to keep going. It's about standing back up no matter how many times you fall. Zitra frowned. But why? Why endure suffering when the logical choice is to stop? Ben chuckled. Because stopping means giving up. And humans, we don't do that. She studied him carefully, even when the situation is hopeless. Ben grinned. Especially then. Zitra exhaled slowly, thinking. Your species is dangerous. Ben laughed. Now that sounds like a compliment. She nodded. It is, because if a species like yours refuses to break, then that means you will always adapt, always evolve, always rise again. Ben shrugged. Now you're getting it. Zytra was silent for a moment before speaking again. Perhaps the Xilari have been wrong. Ben's eyebrows raised. Oh, that's a big statement coming from you. Zytra looked at the door, as if expecting someone to overhear. Then her voice dropped slightly. We believe we are the peak of evolution, that no species can surpass us. But if humanity has the power to overcome limitations through sheer will, then perhaps our way of thinking is flawed. Ben grinned. Took you long enough to figure that out. She glanced at him, and for the first time she smirked. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. Ben laughed. Oh no, was that a smile? Careful, Zytra. People might think you actually like me. She shook her head, but there was no annoyance in her expression. Only understanding. I do not dislike you, Ben, she admitted. Ben grinned wider. See. Progress. Zytra stood up, her posture still strong but lacking its usual coldness. The Xilari have underestimated humans. I will make sure they do not make that mistake again. Ben stood up too, crossing his arms. And what about you? Still think a human can't satisfy your expectations? Zytra met his gaze. I believe I was wrong. Ben smirked. Glad to hear it. For the first time, they weren't just a test subject and a scientist. They were something more. Ben stood in the middle of the research facility's central chamber, watching Zytra as she worked on her holoscreen. The usual cold, clinical atmosphere of the place felt different now. Something had changed. Not just in Zytra, but in the way the Xilari viewed him. The scientists who had once dismissed him as a mere test subject now observed him with respect. They whispered among themselves, analyzing the results of his trials with awe rather than skepticism. Zytra turned off her screen and faced him. I have completed my report. Ben leaned against a console, arms crossed. And what's the big conclusion? She hesitated, something she had never done before. Then she spoke. Humans cannot be measured by standard metrics. Ben smirked. So we broke your fancy science, huh? Zytra gave a small nod. Yes, your physical capabilities are inferior to many species, yet you persist. Your mental resilience is beyond what we predicted. And most of all, your ability to adapt and overcome defies logic. Ben grinned. Sounds like you finally get it. Zytra stepped closer, studying him with curiosity. The Xilari have always believed that strength is something measurable, power, intelligence, control. But your kind proves that true strength is something else. Ben shrugged. Took you long enough. She tilted her head slightly. Perhaps, but now I must decide what to do with this knowledge. Ben raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Zytra took a breath, something rare for her. If I report my findings, the Xilari High Council will have no choice but to reconsider their stance on humanity. They may see your species as a threat. Ben chuckled. Wouldn't be the first time someone underestimated us. She shook her head. No, this is different. If the Xilari view your species as dangerous, they may attempt to control or eliminate you before you grow stronger. Ben's smile faded. Ah, that's not great. Zytra's golden eyes locked onto his. But I have another choice. I could alter the report. Minimize your achievements. Make it seem as though you were only slightly exceptional. Enough to be respected, but not feared. Ben was silent for a moment. You'd do that. Risk your own position. Zytra hesitated, then said, I do not know why, but I do not wish to see humanity destroyed. Your kind fascinates me. You are unpredictable, chaotic, and reckless. But you are also resilient, inspiring, and unstoppable. Ben grinned. Careful, Zytra. You almost sound like you actually like humans. She sighed. I do not dislike you, Ben. He chuckled. That's good enough for me. A beeping sound interrupted them. Zytra glanced at her wrist device. The High Council is requesting my report. Ben crossed his arms. Well, guess this is it. She looked at him one last time. What would you do if you were me? Ben smiled. I'd tell the truth, but in a way that doesn't start a war. Zytra considered his words for a long moment. Then, without another word, she sent the report. Ben watched her carefully. So, what did you say? She smirked slightly. I reported that humans are resilient, stubborn, and highly adaptable. That you have potential, but you are not yet a serious threat. Ben grinned. Clever. Just enough to keep them from panicking, huh? She nodded. For now. A moment of silence passed between them. Then Zytra spoke again. What will you do now? Ben stretched his arms. I think it's time I head home. I've got a planet full of stubborn, reckless humans to get back to. Zytra hesitated. Would you return, if invited? Ben raised an eyebrow. Are you inviting me back? She didn't answer immediately. Then, with a rare, almost imperceptible smile, she said, perhaps. Ben chuckled. Well, I wouldn't say no. Someone's got to keep showing you Silari what real strength looks like. Zytra nodded. Indeed. And perhaps I have more to learn from you. Ben smirked. In that case, Zytra, I'll see you around. As he walked toward the departure bay, Zytra watched him go, her mind racing with thoughts she had never considered before. Humanity was unlike any species she had ever encountered, and she had a feeling this was only the beginning. The end.